and welcome to Talk Speedway podcast, our last podcast of the season. We've been with you throughout all the trials and tribulations of the 2025 British season, and of course the Grand Prix series and stuff as well. We're going to be going through all of the latest reaction to people picking up trophies, Graham, and everything, all the latest news from around the world of Speedway. This podcast is brought to you in association with Stakeford Tyres and Exhausts, ESS Scotland, LVT by Keenwood, and of course our associated partner in the Speedway Riders Benevolent Fund. I'm joined by Graham Muncie, who you can see on the screen, and Greg Blair is going to be joining us, but he is having some technical issues at the moment getting logged in, but we expect
Who
him
said
to
he was
join.
a diva, Scott? Who said he was a diva?
Just trying to be late, making that big entrance like it looks like he did at the red car end of season 2 at the weekend by the look of it. So it'd be interesting to get his take on everything that's there. Greg, we haven't spoken really since people have been picking up trophies due to illness, basically, from the two of ourselves. We've not been able to do it. Rancid COVID, who thought that was still a thing? But anyway, we're here recording our Talk Speedway podcast. It seems like a while, Graham.
Yeah, it has been a while, and obviously season finished for some teams a wee bit longer than others, so it's a bit of a distant memory for some of it. But yeah, still wanting to cover off, and geez, the Speedway wheels never stop turning. Some 2026 news starting to come out already as well.
How is that even happening? We're in November and we've got teams announcing riders. But just to pick up on that quickly, because we'll get to talking about cup finals and playoff finals and stuff when hopefully Greg can join us. But Josh Pickering coming back into the championship, we can pick up on that kind of sharpish, because it's a fantastic addition to the league. But I would be lying if I didn't say I was surprised by number one him coming back into the championship, but the choice of club was also a surprise. Maybe not in terms of the locality of where he bases himself in the UK, but still a shock nonetheless that he's signed up to Scunthorpe.
Yeah, it maybe wasn't news I was expecting, to be honest. I don't follow European Speedway close enough, but I'm not sure if Josh has a club in Poland lined up quite yet, so it's maybe that, aided the decision to go back to doing, well, no one knows for certain, but shall we say 2 leagues in the UK next year. And yeah, you're right. I think locality comes into it. Josh stays kind of in and around that area. He's not too far away from that. That takes a bit of the travelling off it. Everything you hear from Rod Godfrey, he wanted a big number one back in there. He felt that's what's lacked the last couple of years since Ryan Douglas went away. And you'd have to think they're clever enough to have something up their sleeve there. You can't sign anyone on 11.64 out of 40 points and expect to be successful. I don't care if it's ML5 foot enough.
No.
Using more than a quarter of your points on one rider to start. But of course, assuming the laws and the rules stay as they are just now, as soon as Josh has ridden an official match and the next set of averages comes out, he moves back onto his championship rowing average. So 2 points, say, comes off of that average. And if you've started the season with 2-pointers, but you've got a 4-pointer lined up to come in sharpish after, this is all speculation. I'm not, I don't know any ins and outs of what's happening, but if I was a manager or putting a team together and you were spending 11.64 on a rider that you knew was going to drop to 9 point something after one official match, then the next set of averages, that's what I'd be doing. I've not checked the calendar for next year, but if I was Scunthorpe, I'd be making sure my first match of the season was on the 22nd of a month, and I didn't have another one till the 2nd of the next month, and that's the cut-off for the averages, and the new averages would come in. But yeah, it'd be great to see. We all know my club allegiances, and we all know how many years Josh spent there. He is the most entertaining rider in the league. I'll get all the Chris Harris pelters for that going, but for me, Josh is up there, if not just slightly ahead of Chris when it comes to most entertaining rider. The last time he was in the league, he won the individual riders championship, and if you take away the rowing average, just on 2024, am I after it? Yeah, just on 2024 averages, he was the top rider in the championship, and I don't see any reason why he can't be that again.
What do you think this indicates what's going to happen? Because obviously the AGM's there to kind of rubber stamp everything that's been agreed, and we know there's meetings that take place on a regular basis where they would have been sorting everything out, because we've also seen Scott Nicholls been announced. We've also seen Danny King announce at the red car end of season 2 that effectively won't be back at red car due to a rule that's going to be brought in for 2026. We've also seen Emil Saifutinov say he's not coming back for next year. There's a lot of indications there in terms of maybe some changes that are going to be made in both leagues. Because Emil Saifutinov's statement that he made was vague in terms of the reasons as to why he wasn't coming back. He was just basically saying he's not coming back, but kind of vague in terms of the reasons as to why that decision he came to that decision. But I think probably the most interesting kind of statement is really came from Redcard, really. In terms of the Danny King not going back because of some rule that's getting brought in, what do you see that as being a kind of indication as what's to come, basically?
Yeah, and I think we're also was on our friends at Around the Bend, Kane and stuff. They had Dan Thompson, didn't they? And he said the same about Glasgow, that he was kind of ruled out there. It's a double-edged thing for me. One, it makes complete sense. You can't not have these conversations and then go into a 3 or 4 day AGM like it kind of used to be 10 years ago or whatever, and not know what's happening. Speedway's maybe not in a strong enough space for that. So you want, meetings go on, is it monthly? Yeah, again, I can't remember exactly, but the promoters are talking all year round. This isn't you see posts on social media, when's the AGM, how can stuff be done before then? And you're kind of like, because everyone kind of knows.
Also, they've all got a group chat as well.
Everyone's got group chats. It's the bane of everyone's existence these days. The flip side, though, and it's, I think of this from my kind of press head and kind of trying to get Speedway out there. Having clubs announce riders before the AGM and things like that, it kind of takes any momentum out of any maybe announcements that can come out of that. So I don't know if I'm a huge fan of it, to be honest, but clubs have got their own reasons. They've got season tickets to sell. Greg can come in and then start fanning about with a microphone and make some air noise. That'd be great. How are we doing, Greg? Interesting couple of weeks ahead and stuff. But yeah, I think there's going to be a few rule changes. Obviously, the big one that's been rumoured is only one 8-point rider per team in the championship. And I think in the Premiership, we're probably going to be looking at a dumbing down the team building averages, and maybe, if some of the rumours are to be believed, more of an onus on younger British riders.
I think as well what will then happen is guys with 7-point averages are an absolute premium now, and they can name
it's always been the way
their price.
When you bring in a rising star or you bring in a drafting or you've got to have 2 British reserves, then young Brits just go, well, I'm in demand, so my price goes up. You're right. If you're sitting on if it is a 1/8, if you're sitting on a 7.99 average, then the kids are having a good Christmas this year,
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, with a few of the announcements that have been made, I think me and you were speaking off air before we started this, in terms of Richard Lawson, maybe a bit cryptic in terms of he signed a contract in England and in Denmark. Does that point to Richard Lawson leaving the Pirates, considering they're a Wednesday track? We'll just throw that out there. There's a possibility that might happen. I know they work squad systems in Denmark. Maybe he can work around that if he's going to get more track time out there. I don't think he's the type of rider that would be signing abroad if he wasn't going to be racing. He's definitely kind of one of those characters that wants to be on the track all the time. You've got to tip your hat to him for that one. Had a successful season this year with Krakow in Poland as well, so that'll be interesting to keep their eye on. Just before we get to Greg, if you want to drop us a message about anything that we're speaking about during the show tonight, make sure you drop it in the chat below the live feed on Facebook. We've already got a message from John, who says it'll be interesting to see the reception he gets when he comes back to Edinburgh. I'm assuming there he's talking about Josh Pickering there, Graham, but I'll say it, he'll get a hero's welcome when he goes back to Edinburgh, regardless to the fact that he's riding for Scunthorpe.
Yes, that's an easy and obvious one, that.
Absolutely. Greggy boy, thank you very much for eventually getting in. It's good to see you, good to get a good catch up and natter with you as well. But you've been a busy boy on the TV with the British Speedway Network. Obviously going up and down the country. I know you've been doing a bit of heavy work with the potatoes. If you're looking for some tatties, Greg's your man. But Greg, we'll get to the end of the season now, because we've not actually spoken about any of the kind of playoff finals, any of the cup finals, or anything like that. We'll speak about the Premiership one first of all. Leicester obviously had a phenomenal season after the first leg. I think we'd done a podcast after the first leg in terms of Ipswich being fully in the driving seat. But by God, did Leicester make it tough for them in the second leg, and was a lot tighter than what anybody probably thought it was going to be.
Exactly. I think that it was pretty impressive the way that Leicester fought back. The whole meeting, you kind of thought, I thought it was going to be a bit of a letdown, to be honest. I thought this isn't going to be too entertaining. Even though I think the most entertaining moment of the whole night was Sam Masters' impressive get off. The way he just stood up and brilliant. But yeah, it was a good advert for the sport as well, because it would have been a shame if we'd seen what happened, last year when Bellevue went to Leicester and it just was Bellevue run away with it, and it was like, what are the scores going to look like at the end of this? Whereas Leicester put up a big fight at Ipswich. Ipswich are, so dominant at home, but Leicester weren't taking that line down, and fair play to all the boys, and of course the management as well. Stuart Dixon, who's he's had a really good year with Leicester, and he's just got to give himself a pat on the back for that.
Absolutely. There was no way, Graham, that Stuart was going to let that slip by him without going into it with some sort of fight. He was never going to just lie down to that, really, wasn't he? And as much as we were saying that Ipswich were fully in control of the final after the first leg, there's no way a Stuart Dixon team's just going to roll over and let them tickle their belly. They're going to fight, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, and you even saw it in the first leg, didn't you, when he did the interview on BT and basically says, like, I've got the boys together and I've rattled them, because they're sitting on their phones, their heads are down already, and they battled back, didn't they? They got it a little bit closer in the first leg, and to be fair, I still thought Ipswich would go on and win 12, 14, 16 points, at home in the second leg. It wasn't to be. It was squeaky bum time. Come to end it for them, that's for sure. Albeit, I'll give myself a wee pat on the back here. There was only one person that stuck with Ipswich when we did our before the playoffs preview, and I'd said them for the start of the season. Christ, even a broken clock's right twice a day.
Self-praise is no praise. Man say self-praise is no praise.
Well, I'll take it, because none of you pair are going, and that's for sure. But no, it was good.
Okay, it was well wrong.
And what I liked about it, and it's hard to tell at Leicester, but certainly Ipswich, that place was jammed. And we'll touch on it, I guess, to go, so I'm not moving on to it. But same in the Championship playoffs, people have their moans, and top of the league wins the league, and the playoffs are just made for TV and for drama. Great, make them for TV and make them for drama, because if you can put, what I hear, 4,000 or 5,000 people probably at Ipswich. I saw Jerry come out and say there was 2,500 paying punters at Ashfield. Sign me up. Every club in the country says, give me a bit of that.
Absolutely, of course they do. Chris Black has message saying McDavid not got any internet tonight. No, I just didn't want to come on. As simple as that. We spoke about Greg being a bit of a diva and looking to be late on and make that fantastic appearance. Hear him here. McDavid never even bothered.
No.
So, yeah.
Is it not that I'm not listening to any more of those comments for that Walloper Black or something he said in the last message before? I can't remember.
Well, Mitchell, like yourself, was catching a few strays at one point a couple of weeks ago, so maybe he just doesn't fancy that anymore. But to speak about Ipswich, Greg, phenomenal season, really, when you look at it. From the start of the season, they dominated the Premiership, really, and that it speaks volumes to the team that they put together. Because at the start of the year, maybe Jason and Emil Seifutinov weren't firing in all cylinders, weren't putting in the big points that we would have expected them to. But really, the strength and depth. I mean, I think one night at Birmingham, the two reserves were in heat 15 and they had won handsomely. It just went to show just how the strength and depth that they had. They managed in the main to avoid injuries. In the main, I know they had one or two, but all in all, I would say they thoroughly deserved the championship in the end.
Yeah, they did. They did really well. I mean, Dan Thompson, Danny King, Jason Edwards, them boys that just kept piling in the points. And I think I don't know if it's luck or not, but, for Birmingham to finish with Jason Edwards, for then Jason Edwards to come in to cover Jordan Jenkins, to then for Jason Edwards' form to go through the roof was like that. They must, Chris Louis and Richie must have been like, oh, this is a bonus, because that doesn't usually happen. And then for them to be like, you know what, fair play, they stuck with Jason. They were like, right, you've done well. We don't know how, because I think just by reading between the lines when it came to sort of some social media posts, I think Jordan Jenkins wasn't overly sure how his injury was going to hold up. There's been a few times where he's going to be coming back, and then something's developed a little bit more, and he's went, no, maybe not. And I think that maybe Ipswich have thought that could be a big risk, and then Jason Edwards gets picked up by someone else, because that was what was going to happen there. Someone else was going to go, oh, we'll have him, thanks very much. So to keep a hold of him was it was one
of the stranger decisions throughout the season, I would say, for Birmingham to not keep a hold of Jason Edwards and keep Sam Hagan in there. Nothing against Sam in any way, shape or form, but if I was given the option, given the trajectory of their career and where they're at this precise moment, Jason Edwards would have been my pick 100 times out of 100, really, Greg.
But we have seen some weird stuff go on at Birmingham before, so that doesn't really surprise us, to be honest with you. I mean, top hats and whatever else. Like, yeah, right. Jason Edwards was the winner out of that one, but he was the rabbit that came out the hat. But yeah, the Ipswich team, they did really well, and a lot of people will say, if buts and maybes, but they were probably on for it last year as well. But then when Saifutinov got that injury, Jason Doyle got injured as well. It was an absolute nightmare. You know what I mean? They were up against it big time. And when your two big hitters who were scoring big points get injured like that, you can't really replace them at all.
Absolutely.
And that was. I was going to add one thing there, Scott. Sorry, Curtis. That was probably the remarkable thing for me, is actually Emma and Jason weren't great this year from start to finish. I'm looking at their averages just now, and their final effective averages: Emma 8.21, Jason 7.86. Those are probably a point to a point and a half down on where you would have been expecting.
You're about to take some heavy Ipswich criticism there. Didn't have a great year and still averaged 8.8.
But you know what I mean? But that's a calibre Emil. What's the average the last 2 years over here? He's averaged 10 and 9 plus, and he's had good meetings and bad meetings. But it was
you would have expected him to be up there with what, like Max Frick and Brady Kurtz have got. You kind of did think that coming in on that. So yeah, I mean, I kind of see I see where you're coming through there. Still a bloody good rider to have, but maybe not his best performing year.
Yeah, they were definitely solid. Chris has said it's really nice to see them win. Nice way for Emil to bow out of British Speedway. Graham, do you think that's maybe a sentiment that kind of neutral Speedway fans would kind of take? Because as Greg just mentioned there, when you look at them last year, and they lost their big two, when you would have said that they were probably kind of favourites for the title at that point as well. Do you think this is that they were kind of due it at this point, really?
I think so. There's there's very little sentiment in sport, and the best team has to go out and do the job. But weirdly, because we've touched on Jason Doyle as well, maybe similar to when Doyle won his World Championship. He would have won it and could have won it the year before, but for injury. And you kind of felt that actually, I guess if you're a Leicester fan in the final or a Bellevue or a Sheffield fan that was in the playoff, you would disagree with me. But as a neutral looking in, I don't think anyone could have any qualms about Ipswich winning it. As I say, kind of seem to be a well-run club, a well-supported club. They really seem to have a good local buy-in. You kind of saw the social media stuff with them getting the trophy awarded at, I don't know if it was a town hall or it was some kind of civic reception, wasn't it? And kind of had people out in the streets and stuff, and even seem to be in the community. I noticed they were at, they've had Ipswich Town players there. They were at an Ipswich ladies match the other day, I think, with a trophy and stuff. So yeah, I don't think there was too many people outside of those racing against him, I guess, that would have too many complaints. And yeah, maybe made it easier if the rules are changing for him to say, I came here, I've done 3 years, I'm leaving as a champion, I've done my bit for the club, I'm leaving with the team and club as champions. I'll be the one that bows out rather than save you having to make a difficult decision or something like that,
Possibly. Or maybe it was the other way about, we'll never know, I suppose. But it was, to pick up on what you said, it is nice to see like that Ipswich in the community, as you said, in terms of the kind of civic reception and stuff like that. When you see the old photos, Chris Lew, I think Scott Nichols was there, but you seen Thomas Gobb and Tony Ricardson at the civic civic reception. It kind of hits home a wee bit about where we're at, really a wee bit. But as you say, it is fantastic to see them like involved in the town like that, and they do have a strong connection to the football club, and we've got to remember how big a football club that is as well. So in terms of promotion, I know like there's clubs around the country trying to kind of break into their kind of football teams. I know like Edinburgh, I've got a reconnection with Livingston that I helped forged at one point. But yeah, it's good when teams can do that because it's an extra form of promotion, really. But to kind of sum up the kind of Premiership season, I would probably say it's been another successful season for Leicester. When you think that they've just missed out on the Premiership, they've went and get themselves a cup as well. As much as Stuart Dixon's probably disappointed in the fact that they've lost the playoff final, to get to yet another final and be so consistent and have the best rider in the league, I think it's fair to say, in terms of Max Frick. And you see how solid they were. They were entertaining all year. I always say, like, when Leicester's probably the team that you would look at and go, it's just a team behind Max. It's a team full of dogs that you would love to have in your side. And you know what you're getting. You know what you're getting all the time from them. There's the kind of no frills really, without any disrespect. Yeah. And I'm sure, Graham, that they would consider themselves that this to be a successful season.
I think so. I mean, again, second in the league and a cup win. That means it was a better season than 5 other teams had. So it's a 7-team league, isn't it? So there's only one team in that league that's had a better season. Yeah, and that's Ipswich. And you're right. That solid kind of middle order, Becker, Douglas, Masters, Howarth, all never say die, and maybe just, it was probably more mechanical than anything, but they just lacked that wee punch at the bottom end come the final, and I felt Drew Kemp was probably their difference maker all season. Yep. If he scored 8 or 9, Leicester were unbeatable. Yep. And he had nothing but mechanical failures over the 2 legs, and that really kind of lost that potency at the bottom end. And when you look at how tight it was in the final run, and I'm not putting anything on one person, there's 7 riders and there's 15 heats in both meetings, and there's a full season where Drew got them points that they wouldn't have got elsewhere and stuff, but probably that was maybe just that slight lack of consistency at the bottom end that just cost them at the end.
Absolutely.
But you're right, a great season. Cup winning second in the league.
Sorry, I thought you were jumping in there, Greg.
No, I wasn't jumping in.
Good. So, Greg, just to move away from the kind of Premiership kind of action there, you were at Redcar's end of season. You definitely looked as if you were enjoying yourself. And Kieran has said, Greg, where's the Redcar suit this evening? I take it you didn't get to keep Charles's Redcar suit from the weekend?
You know what? I had a great time. Apart from, I don't know who it was that shouted this, but they had a bit for the photography, and the white sheet and that, and they were like, "Oh, put the red car suit on." So I'm standing there on like that, and someone, and what time is it? Right, it's after. Some bastard shouted, someone shouted, "Has the air vest went off?" Still don't know who said that. I wasn't happy about it.
Reveal yourself.
Aye, whoever you
Scott,
were.
you didn't tell me you were at red cars end of season,
I
dude.
know. Incognito.
It was fine. But no, it was. You know what? It was a really good night. It was. It's a funny one because you work with BSN, and you get comments of all different kinds of fans saying that you're biased towards this team, you're biased towards that team. It's quite difficult at times to sort of like level it out because you can be aware of who you're talking about, and then you've got to also think about the viewers that are watching that are not at certain tracks, blah blah blah. And I thought I'll probably get slated for going to red card, but I don't care because obviously Ben and Martin are BSN and they were going, and I was like, this will probably be the only end of season thing that I can get to go to that I'm not actually working at. So I'm going to let my hair down. Dead. And I got quite carried away, but we had a really good night, and it was interesting. And I tell you, the emotion in that room when Danny King had announced that he wasn't coming back the next again year. I was sat right next to Gavin Parr, and Gavin Parr is quite an emotional fella. Anyway, he was absolutely devastated when that went out publicly, and even Danny, when he was speaking, it was. You could tell that he was gutted. Like that wasn't just I'm pretty sure that Danny King would have stayed at Redcar for next season as well. But this rule's come through, can't do that. And the whole room just went silent. It was proper. It was proper hard to see that.
There will not be a shortage of clubs queuing up for Danny King's signature. That's for sure.
Well, that's it. But I guess with this situation for Danny, the silver lining in that is he can put whatever price he wants, really, because there's going to be a lot of them out there that are going to be desperate for it. Now,
well, we know three of them can't. He's really narrowed his options down pretty swiftly.
I'm just wanting to get this because you guys know a little bit more about the whole with the points thing and whatever goes on. For everybody watching, what I do in Speedway is I say what I see. That's kind of it. When it comes to averages and stuff like that, and Graham talks about stuff, I've been involved in it all my life, and I just kind of switch off because I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But I was led to believe that they were doing this over 8-point thing because there was enough riders in each team to give each team one of these riders over 8 points. But with signing Josh Pickering in, does that not mean that someone's going to be out of job?
In theory, you're right. There was nine riders finished the season on an over 8-point average, and there's, assuming all teams come back to tapes next year, there's 9 teams in the league. Josh has now signed, so you've now got 10 riders with an over 8-point average. Now, whether they'll want to come back into the league, whether there's, we've seen a few people that, maybe have foreign commitments or, are foreign based that maybe picked up half a season or something last year that there's question marks over. But you're right, when it first came out, and it was a justification that maybe people just came up with themselves. Nothing's been said officially about it anyway, but I don't know if that was the full reasoning, was kind of there is one for everyone anyway, because some teams might not want it an over 8. Some teams might have been happy with 3 7.5-point riders.
Yeah.
But I think it was about maybe just sharing some of the top riders about a wee bit, and yeah, I can see both sides of it. For me, when you've already got a points limit, then there's a limit for every team to build to. I kind of think it's fair enough to let teams build to within that underneath it, and the chips will fall where they may. But yeah, I think you're right. That was maybe one of the reasons if
this is a rule that's been brought in, I hope there's not just going to be a press release that just basically explains, right, every team's can only have one rider that's above 8. There needs to be this is where the transparency comes in. Why is that happening?
Yeah.
Like, there might have been one, but if you looked at it, there's a few teams, like if you think about Plymouth, the way they built their team last year, or even if you want to go back further, that's how they've built teams in the past as well. They've got a set way of building their teams. So with them effectively going early, that puts Nikolai out of a job. I would assume he's got an over an 8-point average. As you said there, Greg, but the fact that Josh Pickering's coming back into the league also knocks someone out. But if I'm looking at it, like, in terms of Danny, it certainly narrows his options down a fair bit, because if you think about it, like, Glasgow, his first choice will no doubt be Chris Harris. You've got Plymouth, who's announced Scott Nichols. Scunthorpe, who's announced...
Scott's under 8, Scott. Nichols
joking, really?
Drop below 8 by the end of the season, so Plymouth can still sign.
Theory have Nikolai as well?
Yeah.
Really? But in terms of the Danny bit of it all,
yeah.
like, if you're looking at it, you go again. You've got Glasgow, Scunthorpe, Redcar, who obviously won't, Plymouth, who won't. You've got the options are not narrowing pretty swiftly.
And then even you look at other team, like Berwick finished with 2 riders over 8. So do they let both of them go and approach Danny King, or do they speak to one of the guys that were already there? You know,
I have seen some chatter
Oxford
over
have Sam Masters. Do they let Sam walk and bring Danny King in?
Yeah. I have seen some chat in regards to Drew Kemp, and what I would say is, given the fact that he'd signed for Dagverpils next year, I don't know this, but I'm reading between the lines that it would have been doubtful that he would have been back at Berwick next year anyway.
But he's below 8 as well. The two were Peter and Jonas.
Peter and Jonas, well, that's a difficult decision considering... yeah.
You know what? And I can say this without saying this with the Berwick hat on whatsoever. But from what I saw in the last few meetings that happened, Peter and Jonas being at 3 and 4 was probably the best 3 and 4 in the league for that 3 meetings that they had. It was like, Christ, imagine if we had this at the start of the season. Yeah. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I think between them in the last few meetings that they had, I think they only dropped like a handful of points. It was just 5 wins, 5 wins, and it was just like, wow. And then, yeah, you get it's unfortunate for, you know, like a club like Berwick, who's always kind of there or thereabouts below the playoff mark, and then they finally get some guys in that are like, yeah, this is great, and then like, here's a new rule. All right, okay, yeah. Then.
That's exactly it, and it's to say that's where the decision's got to be made. I've got to say, like, Jonas coming in mid-season for Berwick really was one of the signings of the year, I would say. Like, what a find he was once he got his head round Berwick as well, and he was fantastic away from home, all tracks he's never seen before, and definitely it kind of held his own. So just to go to a couple of messages, Shona has said, just like to say thanks to you guys. It's been entertaining and hope you keep it going. Thank you, Shona. Of course, we've got a couple here. Mark has said, we shouldn't, obviously on what we were speaking about in terms of the team building, shouldn't water down an already dwindling sport. Why fix something that isn't broken? Yeah, I mean, I think in regards to that, there always is tweaking in regards to how, like, the points limit. In fact, was there not a rule brought in, Graham, you'll remember this, but was there not a rule brought in last year that the team building limit was going to be in place for a set amount of time?
I think the plan was 3 years, I think, at 40.
So I wonder how that works.
Well, I think it is remaining at 40. They've just added this caveat of one rider over 8. Right. And it's a weird one, because I would argue it's against watering down, because as Greg kind of pointed out, okay, we've now got Josh in the league, but there was only 9 riders above 8 last season, and there is still 9 spots for them. You know, only 2 teams started with 2 riders above 8 last year. One was Berwick, another was Redcar, I think I'm right in saying. Poole didn't even finish. Poole finished with 1 rider over 8. Glasgow had 2, Berwick had 2, Redcar had 2, so they're the 3 teams that kind of affects the most. So, you know, I would imagine the majority, maybe barring 1, if they all did want to come back, will still have a job, and that's where if the argument is it's to redistribute the guys at the top, but then all it means is that the teams that would have wanted a second 8-pointer, I'll go out and make sure they've got the best 7.5-pointer who'll become an 8.5. You know, you win Speedway matches or you win Speedway leagues and trophies by picking a team that will increase their averages. You know, not many teams win by starting the season with 20 points taken up for 2 riders or 18 points taken up for 2 riders, unless they've got a superstar coming in on a 2 that becomes a 5, or a 5 that becomes a 7 or something.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be where the league's won. So while I'm on the fence about the rule, because I kind of say, well, you've already got that limitation off a points limit. Do you need to add secondary limitations? I don't know. I would also argue against the fact that it's watering it down when, in theory, every rider bar one that was in the league last year could be in the year this year. And if one does miss out or has decided to step away, the person that so far that's replaced them is Josh Pickering. You're not watering any league down by bringing Josh Pickering into it.
Mm-hmm. What did Stevie Worrell finish on, just out of curiosity?
Under 7.
Under
by
7.
the time his British
still go back,
thing comes off.
Yeah. Because that was my initial thought, was that maybe that, but again, given Josh's average, if you would need to be building up, it's going to be a long tail for the Scorpions. I can't believe you're not laughing at that. That's tremendous, Pat. I cannot believe you're not laughing at that. Graham,
Christmas crackers didn't come out for another 6 weeks, Scotty boy. Come on.
Stephen sent you a message, Graham. You're bang on there. It's forcing riders effectively to go to clubs they might not want to go to. Tell me another employment that happens, that you're forced to move jobs. Quite a lot, actually. Mine does it on a regular basis, but that's a different thing altogether. But yeah, I mean, Graham, I'll let you kind of address that comment since it was sent to yourself.
Yeah, there's another point to it. You know, we sometimes forget that, don't we? That these are guys that are humans, not just speedway riders. You know, if it means a rider on the south coast has to sign for a rider in the north, and you know, these are guys that often have young families, and it's nights away, and it's travel, and it's tiredness, and it affects them in other ways. And that's a side that's often forgotten about, because Speedway is such a numbers game, and I'm probably as guilty as anyone of just looking at numbers and slotting. You know, everyone loves a wee game of fantasy Speedway, don't they, where they sit with averages, their calculator, and a blank sheet of paper. And it's a very valid point. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
I'll come to you with the next one as well, Graham Fikirin, who said someone was saying, why don't the team who wins the previous year base the averages of that team? No idea how it'll work. Really simple answer I would say to that is that there's probably not enough riders to go around to fill up those averages, really, is there? And I kind of, Speedway is unique in terms of we build regardless of whether you finish top or you finish bottom, we'll start again, and we build from the same amount. But if I had to look at this over the years, this was mentioned to us on a podcast by a former world champion, who I think that Kieran's meaning as well, that if that was then built to the team that wins the league, their average at the end of the season. And see, when I looked into it, it wasn't that far away. Like, see, when you actually brought it down, it wasn't that far away to what they were building to. I mean, I don't have the averages in front of me, but if I had to look at the averages of the teams that's won the leagues this year, it won't be too much above what they started with. You're literally talking about shuffling the pack ever so slightly.
I think it's got maybe more pronounced in the last couple of years as the averages have been lowered. You know, back in the day when you built to 42s and 45s and things like that, then it wasn't as much. And it was suggested, it was not the year Swindon won the league, where before that season it was said that the next season they were going to build to whatever the league champions finished on. And it's a strange one, because I've probably accused of being contrarian here, because I've just said how everyone builds to the same limit, and that is the leveler and stuff. But I don't know if I'm against it. Is success such a bad thing? You know, like, does the English Premier League struggle because Man City have won it 5 at the last 7 years or whatever? You know, it doesn't. And I mean, cover management is still cover management. I mean, look at Pool's record.
That was exactly going to be my point there, Graham. At the end of the day, the teams that are normally up challenging, you see it in the Premiership. Ipswich, Bellevue, they're your what do you call it, staples. In the Championship, Glasgow, Pool, they're there, but they're working to the same rules as everybody else. Do you know what I mean? So it's not as though they've got some sort of sporting advantage here where they can go and get 3 10-point riders and just fill your boots with whatever you want. It does make it fair at the start of the season, but ultimately clever management is the name of the game. And there's lots of different elements that happen throughout the season, and Liverpool don't win the league by accident. Do you know what I mean? Like they're not a successful club that they are.
Yeah.
Glasgow are not a successful club like they are by accident. They are clever in what they do, and they're well run. Greg, I'm going to run this question past you because I know you're not good on the team building thing like we're talking about, but this one is probably more rider based, which is a bit up your alley. So Chris Black has said, adding the 1 over 8 point rider, do you think that may limit the chances for 2 pointers pushing into the league as teams might go for stronger reserves?
Interesting one, that, actually, because you may think that, there's going to be some guys who are that could be ready to take that step, that have had maybe a good season in the National League, that are ready to take that step, and the phone isn't going to ring for them, and you kind of feel like a points limit and rules and stuff like that are hampering your development, which is another kind of thing that might be shooting itself in the foot a little bit there. Because there certainly are going to be some guys that are ready to go out there and step it up. We've seen it happen, this season, especially with Will Cairns, with him coming in, really holding his own and not going out there and setting the world on fire, which I kind of think that a lot of people thought was going to happen. Well, you've got to remember, he's just a kid at the end of the day. He has lasts, he has wins, he has seconds, he has thirds. He wasn't going to go out and win everything. I do think that there could be a couple of younger guys who are ready to step up and go in that could miss out. And again, some 2 pointers that have already done a season in Championship could find themselves without a job. Some of them that have held their own, that have done pretty well. I know that just for instance, if I go back to Berwick, I think that Dale Wood had an absolutely cracking year at reserve for Berwick. He's started off at the start of the season. Scott, you'll know it as well as I do watching him. Some of the time you were like, like some of the moves he was pulling in the middle of corners and stuff like that. And it was like, oh. But then he slowly started to sort of relax into it a little bit and realise like there's no pressure on you here. Just go out and ride your bike. And he did that. And I think once he started getting a little bit more calm and collected, got to remember, I know that Dale's a little bit older than most of the 2 pointers in that league, but he's not been riding Speedway for very long. He's a novice coming into this sport. He's only been doing it for maybe 4 or 5 years.
I think about 5 years, yeah.
Aye, so fair play for him to do that. But yeah, could Dale be one of the ones that's kind of overlooked? Because it's like, well, he had a really good progressive year in 2025, but we could get this person in and that person in, and then we wouldn't need to bother. And it's like, well, aye. It's a difficult one. It'd be interesting to see what teams think about progression.
Yeah, I genuinely think that now that we're discussing this and just kind of percolating and thinking about it, how teams may look, I think they can go a bit more. If you want to go like 3 5 pointers for talking sake, and then kind of bit like a lot more solid. But I suppose the riders have got to be available to be able to kind of do that. A 2 point rider's going to be in at Scunthorpe. Like if you're signing someone in an 11 point average, you're going to need to sign a 2 to compensate for that somewhere along the line. Graham, another kind of point to yourself from Stephen, just saying, I can't understand having a points limit like Graham said, then restricting you inside that limit to build how you want. If you want to use a 3 high averages and then have a lower end, so be it. That's your choice to build inside the 40. I must admit, I completely agree with that. Like I don't really see the point in restricting it. But as you've mentioned, Graham, the fact that we've only got 9 riders who are above that anyway, just how much it's probably going to take for the announcements to start coming out a bit more regularly to see how teams are actually thinking about this and building it. Because John has also commented saying managements do have the job of recruitment. Who they get determines results. People have just been solid at it for years. And that's exactly my point that I went to last year. But say, Graham, we're not really going to know how that shakes out until we actually see what the team manager thought process is, really.
Yeah, and I wonder, and I'm kind of opening my mouth, letting my belly rumble out here. This is a little spark that came to mind. I wonder if this is an offshoot of the asset system going away, and maybe this was a way to limit. And I'm not naming any teams, and I don't mean it in a negative way if I did, but the teams that seem to be able to attract riders for whatever reason, if it's a way of limiting them slightly, because back in the day, you almost had that kind of little restriction that, okay, the riders could pretty much still say, no, we're not signing for you. But if you were an asset off a club and that club wanted you, they were the first ones that could sit down and put a deal in front of you.
Yeah.
And with that system kind of going away, it's free reign. You know, I'm on about riders' phones have been going since June and July. A lot, you know, this year, talking about next year and potentials and stuff, because there's, okay, it probably didn't always get forward, but gone are that way where if you're a promoter and you want to sign X and he's owned by Y, you need to phone promoter Y and say, we'd like to have him in our team, and promoter Y goes, well, I want him in my team, so I'm going to speak to him first, and if he says no, then you can speak to him.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's a way of just limiting that slightly, so that the teams that maybe do have success a wee bit more than others, that breeds success sometimes, because riders look at that and go, well, they must be doing something right, they must be doing something different. It's not all about money. People, you know, chuck the money thing about all the time. It's not about that. Sometimes it's about practice time. Sometimes it's about kit. Sometimes it's about knowing the wages are going to be in the bank account on a Monday morning or whenever they go in, you know.
Yeah.
These little things will matter. Local sponsorship, you know, bigger crowds, that means more exposure for existing sponsors and stuff. And I wonder, and I'm saying this is a lot just off the top of my head as we sit here, I hadn't thought of this before, if that's maybe where this rule's come from, just as a wee restriction on that. So some of your teams kind of just go in and cherry pick who they want, because there's no longer that restriction that there maybe used to be.
Yeah. This conversation's happened earlier than what I thought it was, because we were going to go through all the finals and stuff. But Greg, we're going to get to the BSN series final first of all. Going to start this by saying, before I catch a couple of bullets, I am not anti-pool in any way, shape or form, but I'm going to be going out here against a few things. If there was ever a team that deserved something for this year, I think it was Redcar. I think they faced a bit of adversity in terms of they had lost Eric Riss, and still sending thoughts to Eric Riss. Hope he's recovering. I know he was at the end of season 2. Maybe you've got some information there, Greg, because I know you would have been networking. But considering they had to deal with that for the majority of the year, what a season they ended up having. Pushed Pool in the playoff semi-final, got to both cup finals. They've had a phenomenal year. The change that they made in terms of Tom Spencer, Jody Scott for Tom Spencer. Again, we spoke about Jonas Jeppesen being one of the signings of the season, mid-season, but Jody Scott has to be up there with one of the best signings of the year. The potential that boy's got is endless. He looks fantastic. Looks as if he's definitely one for the future. But they had a phenomenal year. And one of the reasons that I'm not a Redcar fan in any way, shape or form, I'm only doing a Greg Blair and seeing what I see in terms of congratulating them and having a phenomenal season and thinking that they deserved something. But one of the reasons, and I'm going to hark back to the start of the year when the BSN series was in full swing, the Pool should not have been in that final in the first place. In fact, they should never have been in the semi-final for that matter. They didn't deserve to be there. They got there on a technicality, and it should never have happened. In fact, it's not even a technicality. It was a muck-up.
Now the bullets are coming.
Epic proportions that Scunthorpe never qualified for that semi-final, and I'm still furious on behalf of Scunthorpe of that, but considering their owner is the head bummer, so to speak, I'm sure that there's something written in there that meant that Poole went through, but the fact that Scunthorpe won more meetings for me meant that they should have went through at the semi-final, so it was excuse me, I was buzzing for the fact that Redcar Poole didn't win it for that reason, because I didn't think it should have been there in the first place. But Greg, Redcar in that final, especially down at Wimborne Road, absolutely phenomenal, and they rallied something chronic, didn't they?
It was something. So after the first 4 heats at Wimborne Road, on commentary with the lovely Jason Harold, and we cut over to Laura she was doing an interview, and I remember turning to Jason going, it's going to be a tough night. It's going to be a tough night to commentate on this, because from the start we thought like Poole are going to walk it. We saw that 5-1 with the reserves. We all know what it's like. You know, when reserves are firing, it makes it a hell of a lot easier for your team to make a win. So yeah, I thought, oh, it's going to be an absolute nightmare. And then Redcar turned it round. I don't know what was said. I don't know what was done in the pits. I know, looking at it, with like dissecting it a bit, Louis Kerr probably had one of his worst home meetings. So did Anders Rowe, which went into Redcar's favour. Redcar pushed and pushed and pushed. I think Jody Scott was unbelievable. I spoke to Jody at the awards night on Saturday, and I said to him, I was like, well, I thought when you buried yourself underneath that fence the first time, you would have been a bit wary to stay away from it. And he just says to me, oh no, I just knew how far I shouldn't go. I wouldn't get pulled in underneath it. So, that was it just phenomenal. And I was really pleased to be able to use the words of one of my favourite commentators of all time, Tony Millard, that race that Jody Scott had with Louis Kerr, and it was amazing. Were they dancing together? And then it was, you know, Tony Millard said that about Gary Havelock and Martin Rampala all them years ago, and it was just an absolutely belter of a race. They were just jumping about, switching positions here, there, and everywhere.
You get racing at Wimborne Road, though, Greg.
Get racing at every track. Get racing at every track. I don't know what you get. You get far too much of that absolute horse shit of
I
people.
said that in jest for any Pool fans listening. That was a dig at another set of fans, not the Pool boys.
Oh my, honestly, I know what fans you're talking about. No, that you get people that say there's no racing, but hey,
that a Speedway snobbery, isn't it?
You can go to a football match, right? That's a 0-0 boring crap game, and folk are not going to say, well, I'm not going back to watch football again. It might be 0-0 again.
Graham, I want you to repeat what you said in our chat about Speedway's the only sport that what?
I can't remember the exact words, but I think it's something like Speedway is the only sport where fans expect every match to be the best match they've ever seen.
Yes. Exactly.
And I appreciate that there's conditions that come with that, and everyone wants to be entertained. Of course they do, and there's some tracks in the country that are better than others for various reasons. Prep, shape, football pitches in the middle, greyhound tracks round the outside of them, stock cars, whatever it may be. But yeah, as you said there, Greg, I was in Kirkcaldy for Rafe Rovers versus Greenock Morton in the swirling wind and pissing rain on Saturday, and I can tell you that would have had 400 pages on the BSF. It'd been a Speedway match of how Rafe Rovers need shut down.
It's mental, and I mean, you get some meetings you do get that are a bit rubbish, and you know you can. I know that Chris Harris says the track's a shambles. Well, Poole wouldn't. What Midlow said was, "Oh yeah, right, okay, we've got Glasgow coming. Let's make the track suitable for Kyle Howarth, Chris Harris, Leon Flint to blast around in the dirt and lose it." I mean, it's your track. Do what you want with it. I know that at times that even at Berwick, when we've had a club come up, the track's a little bit grippier because there's some of them that panic and they see it and they're like, "Gee, the size of this place, I'm not riding that." They get a bit of fear into them. And hey, that's what happens. We saw it happen with Berwick Red.
Fans may moan, but see, having worked in sport for a long time now as well, I've never been at a Speedway meeting where there hasn't been riders moaning about the track. Not one meeting have I ever went where there's not been at least one or two riders moaning about the track. See if you do a track walk with a team, at least two of the riders are going to go, they could be doing this or they should be doing that. That needs filled in, that needs pulled out. There's always somebody moaning about something. So, and see, because we work in such a fishbowl of a sport where it's small, those rider opinions make it into the mainstream. And I've said this to you, Graham, as well, right? See, over the last couple of years, Berwick gets slaughtered. Never any passing at Berwick. Never any passing at Berwick. That is literally people that don't watch Berwick on a regular basis. I've been there for the last, 6 years. See, within the last maybe 2 or 3 years, that's the best racing I've seen at Berwick, and every meeting there's passing at it, without fail. So, I don't... That people's then narrative is, it's gate and go, because they see I see Graham posting it, and then Greg believes it, and then I believe it, and negativity spreads faster than positivity. So people jump on the bandwagon with these certain things. And I agree totally with what Midlow said and what you've just said there as well, Greg. I think it's something that's now lost for the sport because we just try to prepare a good track. Teams are entitled to set up their tracks for their riders. The pool riders adapted to the Glasgow track. They adapt to the red car track. They've got to adapt to their own track as well, which I think, to go back to the BSN series final, is maybe something they didn't adapt to that well on the night.
They did have a lot of weather before it. They had a lot of wet weather before, so they had no other option really to prepare it the way that they did prepare it. But it made it a great racetrack. Nobody was complaining about it at all. I did think there was going to be complaints made, and the reason for it is obviously we were there setting up really early. I think we arrived maybe 12:30. Well, I got there about 12:30, 1 o'clock, and they were coming out with the forklift bucket and they were dropping a load of shale down at the first bend because it had gotten washed out and it was a mess. So they had been working on that, and then they were tyre packing that in. And I thought, that'll break up and it's going to cause carnage and everybody's going to whinge about it. And I was keeping a close eye on when they were doing the track walk and they were kicking it and digging it. Not a thing was mentioned, and you could tell it wasn't like it had been made that good you couldn't tell. The shale was a different colour, so you could see what had happened, but everybody walked over it and must have just been like, oh, that's all right, that. And it didn't break up at all. It worked a treat. So yeah, the end of the day, it was a nice surface, and the track wasn't the key point of the night. There was nothing really controversial. I know that a pool fan came over to me at the end of the night and said, Heat 13, I wasn't, obviously, and I get this, they were, we never had replays because we're in the crowd. What was the crack with Richard Lawson? Did he really, because where they were standing, they didn't really see it. And I went and says, well, even if Lawson hadn't have wiped out Charles Wright coming off that second bend, he would have been out anyway because his back wheel went over the white line. Mm-hmm. Like, he was definitely going for that, and the pool fan just went, oh well, fair enough. And I mean, to that was the only question they got asked, and they weren't even raging about it. There wasn't even like, I think for the fact of luck throughout the night, it kept going both ways, with exclusions, with bikes breaking down, Tobias Thompson taking that absolute awful time slapper that he got. That was a nasty one. Like the way he hit the ground there wasn't nice, but it all balanced out. And then the fact that it came back down to the 2 points, they won it by the 2 points, I thought was really good. I think if they hadn't have won it in Heat 14, I think Charles and Danny would have put a little bit more effort into Heat 15 and not let them get away with a 5-1. But it did. It made the scoreline look really good, and and just before I hand over to you, I did speak to Eric Riss on Saturday night, and the good news is Eric was telling me in the last 2 to 3 weeks, he says it's almost like it's just lifted. He says whatever the thing that he's had with his vision has just been sort of like gone. So he's not taking it as like I'm fine, but he's very aware that whatever it is could come back again. But at the moment, he's feeling really good, and yeah, it was good to see him. It was good to see him enjoying himself.
Yeah,
these Germans, they struggle to find them have a good time, but Eric tried his best and he did have a good time.
For xenophobia, well done.
Eric said a lot worse about Germans that night. So,
what was your reaction to the final, Graham?
Yeah, I'd agree with most you said. If Pooh had done it, they would have been worthy treble champions. They were kind of the best team across the piece in the year. But probably actually, I'm just going to repeat exactly what Greg said. Like I said the same in a social media post. If Redcar had had Eric Riss fit and firing for the full season, I think we would have been telling a very different story about the championship and the KO Cup as well. And they deserve something. Obviously, they got the pairs at the start of the season. They got the BSN at the end, and every club says they've got the best fans in the country, and every club does have the best fans in the country for what they do for their club. But there's not many that travel louder and prouder than Redcar, with a flag and bus loads going all over the place. And I'm sure that was echoed into Saturday night and helped Greg enjoy his evening. I'm sure we said he made an entrance on the podcast tonight. I'm sure his entrance on Saturday was better than his exit come the end of the night. But yeah, and I think, I can't remember exactly what he scored in the final, but I think a special mention has to go to Ace Piper for Redcar's season. And I think he kind of wiped the floor a wee bit with awards, didn't he, on Saturday? I certainly won a few of them. And, you know, a kid that's had a tough couple of years, and probably at that crossroads where you thought this could be another youngster lost to the sport, albeit, you know, we know he's from a good Speedway family and stuff, but he just seems to have got everything back and going the right way and in the right working order this year. You know, he's calmed down a lot on the bike. Obviously that helps when you're not coming off as much and having to fix bikes and ride through, you know, knocks and injuries and stuff. And, you know, he was our match winner in a lot of matches and put about 2 points or something on his average. And yeah, another one that maybe didn't burst onto the scene at 16, but still young enough that there could be a really good career there. And well done to Ace for this year.
He did look. He looked pretty upset with you know, because he only got we got 0 points in the last meeting at Wimborne Road, and he looked pretty disappointed with himself. But at the end of the day, Redcar won by 2 points. Ace scored 4 in the first leg. And I think to remind a young lad that, like, well, if you had scored nothing in the first meeting, then we wouldn't have lifted that trophy.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's not just like them 1 point, 2 points here, there, and everywhere. Yeah. They can make such a difference when the meeting is so tight. And of course, you're going to be gutted that you're not helping. Like during the meeting, you're thinking, if we lose this by 2 points, I'm going to take this full responsibility for my performance being so poor. But at the end of the day, it was backed up by the rest of them. And I would imagine the victory for Redcar going back up the road, you just wonder if, like, Jamie Swales and Gavin Parr were like, why did we not just run RR in these other meetings? And you can't
by the time you get to the BSN final, all your riders are absolutely gubbed. Machinery's gubbed. That's exactly why you don't do it.
It was so strange though, because like Jake Allen obviously had that horrific crash at Redcar with the bike going through the fence, and, you know, thankfully nobody was injured in that at all. I know that Jake was in a bit of discomfort. Another reason why they didn't run, they didn't have a guest in. They couldn't have Leon, which I said to Gav, and, you know, even if Leon's listening to this, Leon will know that I'm not taking anything away from it at all. But I said to Gav on Saturday night, you know, Leon's had like an absolutely fantastic season, and then when you sign him up for a guest, it kind of like it didn't like fall to bits, but it was just an underperformance of what Leon can do. And he went, oh yeah, and there was nobody as frustrated in that pits than what Leon was. You know, there was just these little things, little mistakes that were happening. Bike wasn't coming out to start the way it should have been, little mistakes like that. But I guess that the fans take that as like, oh, Leon's done so well for Sheffield, he's done so well for Glasgow this year, we've got him in as a guest, we'll definitely win this meeting. Had an off night. These things happen. And that's the risk you take. And I guess running RR as well can be a big risk, because you could have someone like, you know, Jody Scott goes out and takes the RR ride for Eric Riss and wins it. And then you put Charles Wright out and he cocks it up and has a last. So you just never know, you know, what way it goes. And I guess that's why it makes the sport entertaining, because there's no passing in Speedway anymore. There's never a passing. It's always from the gate. So, you know, we've got to keep it entertaining one way or the other, haven't we? Even my programme board, there's no passing at Speedway anymore.
Well, one thing I will say is that obviously two-legged Speedway is definitely the most entertaining Speedways we've seen over the past month or so, in terms of whether it was being the KO Cup matches, the BSN Series final, and of course the playoffs in the Championship. Got to say, in memory, the meetings that we've had in the playoffs between Redcar and Poole, Glasgow and Edinburgh, and then obviously in the final between Poole and Glasgow, I've got to say it's probably been the best year for it. What's also brilliant is that we've been able to witness all those meetings. Of course, that plays a part in it as well. But I would say in terms of entertainment and, like you said, Graham, in terms of you get the kind of old timers and that go, if you finish top of the league, you should win the league or whatever. But if your club's involved in those playoffs at the end of the year, there is nothing more nail biting. There's nothing, the jeopardy that's involved in that is phenomenal. I've got to say the 4 clubs that made it there. I'm going to speak about Edinburgh first of all, because we've received a message for John, who was, when we were speaking about, I was speaking about the red car having a fantastic season, and John's message saying that he definitely agrees with that, but without bias, I think Edinburgh did really well to get to the semi-final, and to only lose to Glasgow showed a great effort. And it did really, because there was a lot of people who would have had Glasgow, and I think even on this, when we were doing our championship preview way back now, which feels about a million years ago, there was a few who had tipped Glasgow to go and win the league. And I think if you had to have put, if somebody had to say Glasgow, Edinburgh in the semi-final, I think most would have expected Glasgow to kind of run away with that. But the added element to that is that it's a derby and 2 massive crowds, and you could have cut the atmosphere with a knife. To touch on the Edinburgh part of it, Graham, in terms of their season, they had a phenomenal year as well to even get to the playoffs, but just come up short, really.
Yeah, you're right. There was, I mean, I don't think they do them anymore, but back in the day when the old Speedway Star Preview Edition used to rank teams and have van views and stuff, I don't think there would have been many that would have had Edinburgh in the playoffs. I'll not name any names on this podcast who said Edinburgh were going to struggle this year and have a dreadful year and be nowhere near it. You get your hand up as well, Mr. Boyle. That's right. I'm not Derek are going to do what? Exactly. But yes, you know,
That's the babies with the old banditos, I'll tell you that.
Exactly. What does it say? An elephant never forgets. Well, you can say what you want for that, but no, you know, and I think what dragged it along was, you know, the spirit in the camp was as good as I've seen it in a few years. Obviously, kind of like you said yourself about being involved at Berwick, we all know where my involvement is, and you know, that kind of dragged us along a wee bit. We touched on it quite a lot. We spoke quite in depth, didn't we, after the playoff semi? That was the last time I was on, actually. But Jordy Loftus was a find. You know, getting him in, and with no offence to Michael Pamtoft, he tried everything. He came in late. He was still riding for injury. His machines weren't doing what he wanted. Not putting any blame on him, but you just kind of feel if Oscar Polis had given it a few more weeks and kind of settled in, you know, could that have been a slight difference maker? But yeah, you know, the last couple of years having kind of missed the playoffs, to get to there and then to take Glasgow, who finished top of the league, who won at Armadale 3 times before that, you know, to take them to kind of heat 30. And probably that's where, you're right, you're talking about the playoffs. I mean, if apart for the Poole red car semi, which Poole were, what was it, 12-point aggregate? Was it they won both legs by 6, if my memory serves? I could be off slightly there, but there maybe wasn't the last heat drama, you know. Edinburgh Glasgow went to heat 30. Glasgow Poole went to heat 31. And that helps. You know, you can, and this sounds silly, passing's great and you can be entertained, but when there's passing and there's close racing and the scores and it matters, you know, that's what added to it. If that had been Glasgow 55, Poole 35 in the second leg, but the heats had been the same in regards to passing and entertainment on the track, people would have said that was a good match, but well done Glasgow, and we move on. Or if Poole would have won 55-35, the same. But the fact that there was a drama, there's Lawson coming off, there's Cairns having the engine failure, there's a super, you know, that all adds to it. And that's where the playoffs come into it, because as Greg said earlier, you know, it's not about your next heat sometimes, it's about your last heat, because, you know, you never know what point getting that third place in heat 2 in the first leg can actually be the point that makes a difference come the end of 30.
It's funny you say that, because
you know.
Chris Black's mentioned message saying John Campbell and Alex know what they're doing, a chain snap away from being in that final, and again it just goes back to the jeopardy and the playoffs, really. Yeah,
and I'm sure, you know, if Edinburgh got through, Glasgow would have said a an errant couple of extra cheeseburgers for a referee, meaning he fell into a light, or maybe cost them the final, or they had a couple of engine failures as well. Freddie Hodder obviously had bike problems all night, and then Nago had a poor one, riding through injury and stuff. So that balances out, I think, in general. But those are the margins. Heat 14 at Armadale, from an Edinburgh point of view, now becomes a crucial heat. The gate kind of level. Michael Pamtoff comes off. He's kind of gubbed for the rear and albeit he's in it. Yonatan makes a gate, hits the front, and then his chain goes. And I think that's the heat that Chris is referring to. A 3-0 there becomes a 5-1 to Glasgow. There's a 4-point swing, and you're talking 91-89 Edinburgh if every other heat result goes the same.
Yeah. Just to get to the final now, Greg. After the first leg, obviously there was a lot. There is a bit of needle between Glasgow and Poole, and it comes from the two of them being the most successful and most driven clubs in the Championship, I would say. Success drives success, really, doesn't it, in terms of that? But obviously Glasgow having a bit of a moan about the track. But did you think that Poole had enough of a lead going into the second leg to get them over the line?
I think so, yeah. I think Poole knew what needed to be done, and they just had to keep that consistency, and they just had to keep, working away at what they were doing. They had already rattled. I think it was quite funny because I do think that everybody knows that Glasgow and Edinburgh, the rivalry that they have there. I think that's been overtaken now. I think that the Poole Glasgow thing is just like they couldn't be further away from each other, and that rivalry there. I think that bringing it back up on social media again. I know that some people questioned why that they were going back in it again and putting out a statement that Cammy Brown said that he was getting abused by fans and stuff like that. I think it all adds to the drama of everything. Little bits like that. I thought, that's actually quite good. That's quite good work. You've got a big final coming up. Let's just stir the pot a wee bit more. Let's put out on the Glasgow socials that Cammy Brown doesn't like the Poole fans because they were nasty to him. Perfect. It's going to attract. You're sitting there with a fishing rod. Oh, Christ, I've gotten a, it worked an absolute treat. I think more of that stuff needs to happen in Speedway. I know I'm kind of getting away from the subject of it. I don't want to name names, but it happened. If anybody wants to know what it was, I'll tell you. But there was a certain club tweeted about ticket prices against another club for something, if you remember back a little bit earlier in the season.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
the owner of the club that was getting the piss ripped at them was raging and was wanting, you should get it. And it's like, suck it up and let's just have a laugh with this. Like, it's all in jest. You're no going on there slagging off your wife. It's just a bit of fun. We're just having a laugh. It's a sport. Let's enjoy it. And I want to see more of that. I want to see more of that sort of like pettiness. I love it. I think it's so much fun. I think this year, to be honest with you, for the sport, I think this year's been great for media stuff. And I know that people say like, oh, Speedway's only in when this happens or that happens. It's like, well, Ty almost died at the start of the year. That made big headlines. That was everywhere. Then we had Charles Wright and Jake Allen scrapping, right? So that got headlines. Then we had Jake Allen's bike going through the fence and taking out members of the crowd. The one that was on nobody's bingo card was your man for the jungle coming in with Poole, talking about the Speedway Futures thing. So like that was it's been quite a. In all, this year's been quite good for the whole social media side of things. You've got to give praise to Glasgow. They got the world's strongest man there to come to that event, and he hadn't a clue what Speedway was. When I interviewed him about it, he literally was like a child that had just been at the sport. He was like,
he's on a par with Stephen Craigan then.
Yeah. So I just think that overall, and getting back to with the Pool Glasgow thing at the end, I think that was great. There was a bit of a needle going on there, and I like that. And I do like the fact that I like what Midlow posts on social media as well. I think Midlow's well
He had
funny.
them on strings. Like we've had Middle on a few times. He didn't believe half of what he was saying, but he knew the reaction he was going to get. He was just sitting there, puppet master, puppet master.
I speak to him and I was like, "Oh, you were on. I see you were going at the comments," and he was like, "Yeah. Maybe I had one or two many JDs the other night, but I just go on, I wind them up, and then turn my phone off." It's just, and I think like Neil Middleditch is one of in our sport, in British Speedway, he's one of the biggest names for what he's done in the sport, and the trophies that he's won. And I think to have a guy like that just going on and putting on these petty wee comments and winding up fans, I think's class. More of that needs to happen. Teach Alec Harkness how to work at Facebook, because we actually had to edit out one of his comments from a BSN interview when he was at Berwick at the start of the season, and I can't remember what the context was, but he was
Something
really
about
angry.
a dog.
Yeah, he was really angry about something at the start of the season. I think it was the Berwick had been at Edinburgh the night before or something, and then he went, and then like during the interview he went, and I tell you what, if I'd had a dog, I would have booted it around the house. We had to edit that out of the post. We thought it was really funny, but we thought, there's the thing is, right, and the people that are watching this now and the people that will listen to this in the future, they'll get it and they will understand it and they'll laugh at it. But there's a lot of thick people that watch Speedway, and they would have thought, and they would have seen that and thought, oh, Alec Harkness went home and booted his dog.
In the Morning Sun, BSN frontman Greg Blair says Speedway fans are fickles.
There's a small majority. There's a small majority of them, and we can find most of them in the black and gold after.
Well,
me being one
thanks
of them.
very much for watching, everyone. It's been a good 6 years. Enjoy your Speedway in 2026.
Greg's going out in a ball of flames here, isn't he? To get back to what we're kind of talking about, because I don't think Greg actually answered the question there, Graham. Pool going into that second leg, did you expect Glasgow to run out winners? Because obviously we'll get to the drama that then ensued, but from the first leg result, how did you see the kind of second leg going? Who did you expect to come out on top?
I thought it would be tight, because Glasgow have got 5 heat leaders at Ashfield. We spoke about that after the semi-final.
Yeah.
Vlad's Nagel, who I noticed I don't think was at their end of season presentation. That makes it 70%. I don't know if that rider replacement. I guess Greg, did you get a phone to be the guest for that?
I was too busy at the car. I'd already signed for that.
He's what they did about him.
Sat nav only knows red car in Glasgow is the 2 postcodes that are in it. I must have got it in the Barras. But
that's
yeah,
the BSN van.
But joking aside, I thought it'd be tight. We know how good Chris Harris is in WoW. There's only so many words that has been said about him that's left. That Heat 15, there's 3 riders in the country maybe that could have done that in that one, and he's one of them. As I said, Nagel would be very good at home. Dan and Leon, and early, I thought Poole were holding them well, and then it just started turning. And round about that heat 13-14, when Lawson comes off in 13, and it's a correct decision by the ref. There was contact, but it was early in the corner, and Richard kind of said himself, didn't he, on the BSN after, that what it actually did was just put him off his line, and then there maybe wasn't the material on the inside of the track to hold him up, and he skated across. And then obviously Will Cairns' chain goes went in third, and at that point you're just starting to think to yourself, are the stars aligning here for the Tigers? I was surprised a little by the gate choice Glasgow made in Heat 15. And then I was very surprised that Kyle Howarth got the nod to go out in the super heat again. It's hard to tell, in the pits. You don't know how other guys are going. Dan had been passed pretty easily by Louis Kerr in his previous heat. Leon, by that stage, or him and Chris Harris going to be chasing the same line a wee bit if they end up at the back. you don't know how long it's been since some riders were out. Nago hasn't been out since heat 10. It's a long gap. You can second guess all that, but I was quite surprised when that lined up as it did. And by that point, I thought, right, I think when it went to the superheat, I thought, Poole, I've got this now. But during it, it swung. Early doors when, was there only 2 or 4 in it, kind of 5 or 6 heats in, and you're thinking, as in on the night, so Poole have still got a 6 or 8 point lead, you're thinking, this is looking kind of cosy, and I think they'll get there. But man, did it come down to the end, and yeah, great drama. 2,500 people, as Jefferson has said in the stands, as we said. So a great advert.
Yeah, Joanna, my wife, was there with my wee boy, and she's not, as you would expect, she's not exactly a massive sport goer. Only since she's met me, she's been dragged to all sorts of things like NFL and Speedway and God knows what else. And she said it was like the best atmosphere of anything she's ever really been to. The final, you could have cut the atmosphere with a knife. It was so tense and everybody pacing up and down the stands as the night went on. But again, I know I keep harping back to it, as the beauty of the playoffs. You're constantly looking at the aggregate. It's not just on the night. You're more kind of concentrating on the aggregate score rather than anything else. Yeah. I suppose that's a mentality thing as well. If you've got the right mentality, you don't do that. You concentrate on the night and you let the aggregate score take care of itself, really. But I suppose when you're probably a fan or whatever, you're constantly just looking at that. I tell you, a rider who I was very impressed with at Ashfield was Zach Cook, considering the pressure that the Pirates were under. You mentioned there in terms of Dan, Leon, Kyle Hurth, Nago, and obviously Chris Harris in there, and Greg.
We can say it after the fact. That was a nasty move by Howarth on Cook.
Yeah, it was.
That was over the line. Cook kind of got, the referee's got to look at that and go like that. And I don't mean this to sound like I'm bashing against Kyle. That's how he had to ride to try and get there. Sometimes the referee's got to realise they can make a decision with somebody having to go down and risk injury.
Yeah. Well, that's that.
There's hard racing and Robbins racing. That's the old saying. But for me, that went over the line a wee bit.
Absolutely. But Zach,
Greg was wild.
But Zach Greg was fantastic. Our very own Mitchell Davey on the spanners for him at Glasgow. But he was phenomenal, and he played a captain's role. There's no doubt about that.
He did. What he did that night was superb. Taking on the captaincy from his brother, and the pressure on his shoulders. His brother done the treble as captain. He'd be wanting the same thing. I think that it was brilliant all night. And for someone who's not ridden the track at Glasgow that often, I think that probably was his best performance that he's ever had there. And he was at a point he was untouchable. He was getting that far out in front. He was getting the wheels in line, and he was riding it superb. I think that he has had not just like a great season for the Pirates. I think he's had a great season all round. Zach Cook's been really good, and he's been Mr. Consistent, certainly in the championship, and he's done himself really proud, and it's been impressive. And I was going to actually add that red card didn't sort of go back with the BSN thing for Poole. That was both. What is it? They were in 3 finals, and Poole never got to lift a trophy at home.
Wow.
The second leg was always away. That just kind of clicked there, and the last chance that they had, red card pinched it off them. So that's something else that's probably going to hurt, and we're going to see Poole coming back with even more fire in their bellies next year. But,
I don't know. There's something a wee bit nice about. I know you want to do it in front of your own fans, but there's something a wee bit nice about lifting a trophy in front of the home crowd. Yeah. As an away rider,
running over to like the 15 people
that's travelled. I know. Fair play to the fans that travelled though, because we've seen a lot of fans travelling.
There was Poole fans up at Glasgow. There was, I even seen some Edinburgh fans at Glasgow as well, which is never a good idea. But there was there's some Monarchs fans there. But no, like for the distance that are the travelling, If any of the fans are listening to this, watching this just now, by the way, hats off to you for travelling that and supporting your club and supporting British Speedway in a whole. That's not just your own club you're supporting British Speedway. So well done to you guys.
And just to touch on another point, Scott, you were kind of saying about the playoffs there. It's, for me, because it is that sudden deathness, that kind of one-off. Like, you were kind of involved on the media side at the time, but this is definitely a 50 pence in a jar moment. But it's the only kind of experience I can think of. Is obviously the Monarchs have lifted the title 5 times in my lifetime. 2003 was the first, and that was great. But I found out about that by phoning the old club call line to find out that Isle of Wight had been beat at Reading.
Yeah.
Compare that to 2014, Somerset, Heat 15, 5-1, the race has been awarded, Bedlam ensues, and it's no contest.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. When Greg was mentioning there about Glasgow and Poole, like, kind of overtaking the Glasgow and Edinburgh rivalry, my mind immediately went to between 2012 2014 between Somerset and Edinburgh. They always seem to be in cup finals together. They were in playoff finals together. They won some, they both won some, they both lost some. And I think that's what the Glasgow-Poole rivalry is kind of missing at the moment in terms of that, because at that period, 2013, 2014, although Edinburgh got the better of them 2014 in cup finals and playoff finals, etc. The year before that wasn't the case. So like both, it then came to that where when you spoke to both promotions, they're like, I am sick doing this drive, this travel, try to find ways to make it cheaper and quicker and etc. etc. When Greg mentioned that about Glasgow-Poole, but Glasgow's going to need to get over the hurdle against Poole a couple of times to make it that, to, like, it's only a rivalry if both of you are taking trophies off one another at some point. So it's not a dig at Glasgow.
23, didn't they?
What?
They got over the hurdle in 20, was it 23?
Yeah.
And the one there, but I think you're right. If you look at kind of the amount of aggregate matches they've had, I imagine it's still heavily in Poole's favour over the last few years.
This year alone, so Poole beat Glasgow home and away. They then put them out the KO Cup, I think that was, and then they beat them in the playoff final. So three two-legged attempts, they've not managed to go over the hump with them this year. So despite the fact Glasgow finishing top, when you look at the dominance that Poole's had over Glasgow in that aspect, you would maybe say that Poole kind of deserve it. But just to go down to this, the last heat decided, it can't be any more nail-biting than that. For just how astonishing, Greg, is it that the away team then that come out and top in that, because Glasgow have worked all year to get to the point where they have the second leg. They're the team that's won the league. They've finished top. They've got the right to host the second leg. But the away team then pop out and what would that be, a 7-2 in the final race? It's not really what I would have expected from that. I think everybody was in shock, and it's one way to silence 2,500 people anyway. But again, I think that shows the character of Poole as a club, and obviously Richard Lawson and Zach Cood, their mentality as well.
I think that for it to go to a super heat as a neutral was absolutely class. But see, if I was a Glasgow fan, for it to go to a super heat and lose the 7-2, it would have just been a season that I would not wanted to. I would want to forget that. That would have been absolutely heartbreaking to lose out in the super heat. You've basically drawn the meeting. It went down as a draw, and then to get humped in that. I do think, like you've mentioned it, I do think that Kyle Howarth, I probably would have tried Nagel or Leon in that. After the Heat 15, I maybe would have just said...
It's a big call, but I understand the call. It's a big call to switch it up. And there was a discussion, you've seen it on the BSN as well, there was a discussion around it.
I remember that sort of thing that's looking in your... Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I thought the body language didn't look there.
No, it didn't look great, did it?
It looked like there was something wrong. It wasn't a happy conversation.
There was hands on hips.
Yeah.
There was a lot of hands on hips, and there was a lot
to
of...
the side.
Time warp.
It just seemed like it wasn't... Aye. I felt the. It's funny you say that because I was also it's obviously being at at Glasgow for the Glasgow Edinburgh match, and I did feel like the wind had went out Edinburgh sails as well throughout the management and the riders and the way that they were moving about. And again, and I'm not just saying this because he's a mate. Leon was so vocal in that pitch with Glasgow that night. He was running up and down everybody. He was slapping arse. He was properly geeing them up. He's like, we can do this. And Leon was mentioning like they're bricking it, like, and it was right enough. And that kind of like shouting at your teammates when you've got the opposition right next to you and the opposition manager there, and you're kind of having a laugh at the same time, but like a serious laugh, like, oh, you know what's going to happen if you win this one, and oh yeah, like, like little private jokes and stuff like that. I think that a lot of that did get into into Edinburgh's head because you could see it, and it was one of the lads that was on camera had said, he went, you just feel like the atmosphere's been sucked right out of Edinburgh from in the second half of that meeting, which was a shame because I think that if the boost wasn't there, and I think the big loss there was definitely Paco. I think the fact that Paco was missing, not just as a rider, because you look at the RR, it was probably
six or 6+1 or something. So
probably
kind of on a par with Paco's kind of normal scores at Glasgow.
That's what he does at Glasgow. But to have that personality there is a big difference. That was a big miss. The score pretty much the same as what Paco usually gets at Glasgow, but to miss Paco from that was a tough one.
So you're saying that that's what happened with Glasgow against Poole, you think?
Yeah, I think the wind went out the sails at Glasgow because they were kind of like, we can't get out the starts. And then I think that, for instance, if you're like a younger rider, like a teenager or whatever, or really early 20s, and you've got, I know that Dan and Leon are still young guys as well, but when they're scratching their heads saying they can't get out the start, neither can Kyle Howarth and Chris Harris, the rest of the boys are going to be like, oh, well, if I miss the gate, I'm not getting the blame for it because them guys can't do it either. So that feeds into it as well. It can be quite tricky. I know that, I've not ridden at that level and been in that kind of meeting before, but being in National League meetings and stuff, see when you've got one guy who's like a big influence on the rest of the team, there's always like a couple of personalities in it. When they're having a bad night and they're coming in and they're throwing stuff about because it's not going right, or if they're shouting at their mechanic, they're having a full-blown argument. When that happens, it affects the rest of the team. I don't care who you are, it affects the rest of the team, and it can be quite a struggle to be able to pick it back up.
Who was doing that, Greg?
I'm not sure because I wasn't even about that at that point.
He's bottled it. He's bottled it.
5 pence, 50 pence, flap.
Come on, you went that far.
So yeah, there was a bit of that going on, arsehole. But you've got that doesn't help, and I know that it's tough because you'll probably look back at that and you would go, I shouldn't have done that. But when you're full of adrenaline and things aren't going right, you can't not act like that. It's tricky.
And I think it's maybe something else that comes, and this isn't again to pile on anyone over other, but when you've done it as many times as Poole, and then you've got a mid-low in the pits, or even Javi, people maybe forget, ex-world champion and that kind of thing. They've kind of seen it all, and they're maybe able just to step back and calm things down a wee bit, and maybe others get caught up in it as well. And that sometimes it doesn't make a difference. Sometimes it can just be that we're talking about fine margins, aren't we? When we're talking about superheats and how tight it is and stuff, and whether it was a difference, whether it wasn't. I only saw what we saw through the BSN screens, but yeah, those kind of conflabs that were happening in the Glasgow pits, I can't remember if there was one before Heat 15, but certainly before the Superheat, I just thought to myself, Kyle, and I could be miles off. I could be 100 miles off here, but I just thought Kyle he's either no wanting it, or he's forced his way into it. I don't know what way it went.
Yeah.
But I just thought there's just something that I don't think's quite tying up there. And maybe it was easier on the pool side because they had, Richard Lawson's, for anyone's money, depending on who you ask, first, second, or third when it comes to the top rider in the league. Some will say Sam, some will say Harris, some will say Richard Lawson. And Zach Cook, as you said, was the best rider outside of Chris Harris on the night. Whereas Glasgow maybe had their Chris Harris, and then they had 3 or 4 options, and maybe that just made it a bit tougher.
I think as well. I've been in pits, and I was in pits this year, where you've got guys who you say to that you want them to do heat 15, but they maybe go, but there's maybe another rider more vocal who wants it more than them, who will turn around and go, no, I want it, and they're happy not to have it. And at that point, if you're I don't know the conversation that was going on. I'm only going on body language. We obviously couldn't hear what was said or anything. But if you're going by Kyle's, he's not a rider who would say no. So going by his personality, if Cammy Browns went up to him and said, right, you're in the superheat, he's going to do it. He's not going to argue and go, no, I think you should put somebody else in, or X, Y, and Z. I think the biggest problem for Glasgow was getting into the superheat was that the 2 best riders, you wouldn't necessarily describe them as great gators. Like they're not folk that are great. They come from the back. Whereas when you looked at how Zach Cook and Richard Lawson were going, they like not just going where they've been, how their careers have progressed, is that they are gators. They are good gators. So the problem is that Glasgow were going to have to win that from the back. More than likely have to do that. And when you've got, somebody mentioned earlier on about maybe Leon trying to get to the line that Chris Harris was. If Kyle doesn't make the gate and Chris doesn't make the gate, they're both fighting for the same bit of track as well. So if you look at it from that point of view, I would have been kind of looking at who's most likely to make a gate here. Who out of all the riders that I've got at my disposal here, who's the most likely to make the gate and then let Bomber do his thing coming for the back? Like let him, all he needs to do is pass one, and then you can fill in the spots. Even if you get somebody to gate, hold up the rest and hope he beats one rider and let Bomber do his thing, and he only needs to beat one rider as well. So that would have been kind of, we're all working with 2020 hindsight here to go, well, that's the way it worked out. It could have just as easily worked the other way, where Bomber and Kyle Howarth went out and got a 7-2 themselves. It could easily have worked that, and in a parallel universe, I'm sure that's happened. But it's just the way that it could have worked out. But what
better when they travel in a parallel universe.
Exactly. But
not how many parallel universes there is.
It's if we to sum it up though, I would say that it did the season justice, that final. I would say that. Glasgow obviously they're moaning about the track down at Poole. I don't blame Poole in any way, shape or form that they set their track up to suit their riders. I think that's their right to do. Same as it's Glasgow's right to set up their track for their riders. It's just that the Poole riders adapted to the Glasgow track better than the Glasgow riders adapted to the Poole track. And that's just the way that it works.
By a ball here.
By a ball here as well. But yeah, I mean, so I'll ask one question and then I'm going to go to, I'll ask you just to kind of sum up really. I'm going to ask you this, Graham. Kieran said, what atmosphere was better, Glasgow versus Poole this year or Edinburgh versus Somerset in 2014?
I mean, I was only at one of them.
Yeah.
And I'm an Edinburgh fan. We all know that. But there wasn't, I could be wrong here, but there wasn't 2,500 people in Armadale in 2014.
No.
So that it was a difference. It was a sense of relief. The relief that came through everyone when Edinburgh done it. Because as much as I'm contradicting myself, because I've said the team that comes top doesn't matter, the playoffs are there. Edinburgh ran away with it that season up until the playoff final. Was it 20 matches unbeaten, 22 matches unbeaten or something to start the season, then another 10 match or 12 match unbeaten run.
Yep.
There were double-digit points clear of Somerset. They walked the 2 cups. They won the pairs, despite the fact Craig Cook, who was the top average man in the league that year, was at Cardiff. So there was that sense of, we can't bow this now, and with 3 heats to go, I made a whole podcast I made Edinburgh Glasgow. I didn't say we once. Edinburgh were 10 down or 8 down going into heat 13, maybe, or whatever points we needed. It was 5-1, 3-3, 5-1, wasn't it? So we must have been 6 down, or finished 9-8. Doesn't matter. We won by a point. So there was still that stress. It was a stress relief rather than a release, rather than it took that minute for the celebrations to kick in. So if I'm being neutral, I can't be neutral, but I would say just because the amount of people that were there, and maybe the Glasgow one might have been better. But we all know what colours I wear.
I would actually completely agree with you in terms of the relief. It was more of you get into the playoffs in Edinburgh, the atmosphere around it basically was we can't blow this now. Like it wasn't.
But you were I wasn't at the away leg, Scott. You were at the away leg, weren't you, in the pits? And
by the way, can I say
Edinburgh
that is one thing I would say is that at one point I was there with Derek Snedden in the pits, and at one point it was just like Somerset were just like running away with it, totally and utterly running away with it. And I remember saying to Derek, you need to get the boys in here and go, we didn't work all year to get to this point and blow it, because that's the way that it was going. Like, get the guys in and go, we need to go back to basics a wee bit. And certainly they pulled a good few points back, but again, get into the second leg, it was always going to be tight. But as I say, because of the fact that you can't win it in the first leg, but you can certainly make it as difficult as you possibly can. It was almost, it wasn't as if you won it. It was a relief that you didn't lose it, as daft as that sounds. And the feeling afterwards was like that as well. It was always like, thank God we got over the line there. Thank God we got over the line there, because if they had blown that, it would have been, everything up to that point would have been absolutely nothing. But as it stands in history states, you go down and you look at that 2014 Edinburgh team is probably the greatest team in the second tier history in terms of what they achieved over a 2-year period. Won every single cup, won a couple of them multiple times, won the league multiple times, won it against Glasgow over 2 legs. It just goes down as one of the greatest sides in second tier history, I would say, whereas the Glasgow pool things get bits to go, I would say, before it reaches either of them can kind of claim that, I would say, not being biased in any way, shape or form, being involved in it at that point. So and hi to Ben Duffel as well, who's saying hey Pavel, which is a bit of a joke that Greg will get with that one, but how would we sum up the kind of Premiership and Championship kind of seasons this year? What would be some high points for yourself? I'll come to you first, Greg. What would be your high points of the seasons for both leagues? I know I'm putting you guys on the spot here, and I'm trying to waffle for time while you can think. But what would be your high points of the year?
I'm gonna say what we've been talking about. I'm gonna say the playoffs, the finals. I think that over the 2 legs has been phenomenal. I think that both of them, there's not really been a runaway situation with it. It's been intense to watch, and it's went down to the wire. I think it's been a really competitive. This is not just the finals. This is playoffs as well. I think that the whole shebang has been pretty entertaining, and I think that it's been brilliant for British Speedway.
And of course, my dog has picked the exact time to walk up behind me and take a massive drink of water here. So sorry if that's coming through the mic. I shall burp in a minute. That's what she does next. But there's been a few things for me. I think Greg's completely right. The playoff finals, particularly I'd say the racing was probably slightly stronger in the first leg of the Premiership rather than the second, and then obviously the opposite in the Championship. But I think there's been a few things, maybe outside of the leagues, the under-19 final. Mm-hmm. You're kind of seeing that there is a group of guys there that, who knows what they'll do. Is it Will Cairns? Is it Cooper Russian? Is it whoever that's going to be the next big thing, but there's a good solid core there that should hopefully move up, kind of Championship, Premiership the next couple of years. I think the fact that we saw some solid performances and people kind of kick on a wee bit more. I'm thinking of people like Drew Kemp, who carried on his development, Dan Thompson, Tom Brennan. If we think of Team GB, and then getting to see some of the guys, who knows what the Premiership's going to look like next year. So still having another year of watching Brady Kurtz, Dan Bewley, Emil, Jason, Max Frick, the holders, etc., and their pomp. It's easy to be doom and gloom. If you didn't know what Speedway was and you just went on forums and social media, you would shut the curtains and shut the doors and go away. But I think there's a lot of good people, a lot of good clubs striving to do the best. Plymouth, I think, had a great year by all accounts in regards to attendances, and now they've launched the app and their social media's on point and really pushing them down there. Moving to Saturday seems to affect them. We've seen Jerry Vicenna give a couple of interviews about his plans for Glasgow and the fans there getting through. He spoke about Berwick, some of the racing down there, the best been seen in years. You could probably go down club by club and outside of probably sadly Birmingham, who obviously we've lost, and maybe Oxford just with the year they had, albeit the Chargers won the National Development League, so still something for them as a club to cheer. Everyone could probably pick positives out of it, and we need to shout about that more. This whole, the rules and this. When you take somebody to Speedway for the first time, they didn't care about guests and averages, and they go and they watch four guys going, like you said about Joanna there, going to that. If you were a stranger and you'd never been to Speedway in your life, and you went to that playoff final, would you have given a toss about tacky subs and playoffs instead of league stand? Or would you just have went, as sport and drama, this is as good as it gets? And we need to be shouting about that more. And for me, that's the positive, that that's still out there. We just need to get a bit more on board with it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, the Premiership, the disappointing one negative I would say for the Premiership is that in March we probably looked at it and said there was four standout teams, and I more than probably anyone was kind of saying that it's just a matter of what order they kind of finish in, and really they finished in the order that we would probably have expected them to finish in as well. So from that point of view, that was a wee bit of a negative. But what I would say is once they got into the playoffs, I thought the meetings were fantastic. I think Leicester winning the KO Cup as well. I also think Kings Lynn getting to the Cup final, putting Ipswich out, was also a bit of a high as well in terms of. I mean, Kings Lynn were a team that were set up a certain way. They went against the normal, conventional way of building a team. And what they did then in terms of the Cup and putting out Ipswich, who again really strong, ended up being champions. So that was a mega thing for them. And obviously Leicester were just a bit too strong for them in the final. Leicester's season for me is one of the kind of highlights. They're a team full of likable people in the background. Definitely a team that if you were to go for a beer with them all, that would be the team that I would pick to go with. Full of guys that are very easy to root for in a way, and that was definitely a positive. For the Championship point of view, exactly what you just said there, Graham, is exactly what I think. See, in terms of the Championship, there is a fantastic product there. There's always been a good product at Championship level, but I actually think this year it got taken to another level again. We were deep into July, and we kept talking about there's 9 teams in the hunt for the playoffs here. Yes, you had Glasgow and Poole who were that wee bit of a difference at the top, but the other two positions, we were debating that for weeks and weeks on end about who could make a run, who could get there. Plymouth made changes, Berwick made changes, right up until their last meeting. Berwick were in with a shout at making the playoffs, just depended on other results. But that was the thing, is that even if your team wasn't riding of a weekend, every team was looking at the results because it affected them. They were looking at the teams they had still to face. It affected how people seen the league, etc., etc. And one by one, we ticked them off as the weeks went by about teams that weren't going to get there. And I genuinely think that this is one of the best years for the championship. We've seen some really, really strong teams in the championship this year. You just look at the kind of, especially the teams that ended the season, the changes that kind of Berwick made, that Plymouth made, and I genuinely think that this has been one of the best years at kind of championship level, which was one of the reasons why, when we were speaking earlier in terms of the change that we think's coming in terms of the over 8-point rider, like, I don't want to mess about with the championship too much. The product's already good. Like, it's tried, tested and proven. The product that's there in the championship is good. We've got good tracks in there, good clubs, well run clubs as well, and it seems within our stratosphere of the sport and British Speedway, when teams go into the Premiership, there seems to be this kind of dubiety over the longevity. How long can they last at that kind of level? Like, you don't want to see teams going bust like Birmingham did. I'm not saying if they were in the Championship that it wouldn't have happened. The circumstances outside that dictate that it wouldn't happen. But if you look at Oxford as an example, Spires was almost a drain on Oxford as a club. It's brilliant to have a Premiership team, but the realistic point here is that most Oxford fans, and Laura has testified to this as well, is that they're Cheetahs fans. So the team that they root for primarily is the Cheetahs as well. And again, if you look down all the clubs in the Championship, I'm sure the majority of them have got a what if. What if this change had been made? What if we had won that meeting? Whereas I don't think the same in the Premiership. There was a clear gap between teams. Whereas I think if you put Berwick into that playoffs, or if you put Plymouth into that playoffs, you just never know what's going to happen. You would never have known, because you get, like, if you had to debate it out, or were the team that finished the season for Berwick, were they a better team than what Edinburgh are? But Edinburgh got the points on the board and they got there. So, as I say, I think it was a phenomenal season at Championship level. I would like to see the cup competitions done a lot sooner than what they are. The BSN needs out the road. The couple of things I would pick up on is, I didn't like the pairs in the Riders' Championship at the start of the season. That has to be reassessed, and I don't even think the crowds reflected on what could have been. Fans are not into their way of going to Speedway. I don't think at that time of the season. The crowd was okay at Workington. It wasn't it wasn't where it was at Oxford or whatever before Grand Prix or whatever. But I definitely think that needs looked at and kind of moved. Something that we've tinkered with that didn't need tinkered with. But all in all, I would say it's been a terrific year within British Speedway. We've also got the thing with the TV deal. Graham, I'm going to come with this first. For me, British Speedway needs to be on some sort of broadcaster. And I'll tell you the reasons, because I have looked into this. And I'm careful not to ask Greg about this, because obviously he's got a job with the streaming service that covers British Speedway. So I don't want to put him into a position. So I'm going to ask you this, Graham. When you look at streaming, I think the BSN has been fantastic for British Speedway as a whole. It's opened up a world to maybe fans of clubs who have closed down and they've not got a track close to them, and they've been able to buy into the Speedway world again by subscribing to British Speedway Network, which I think is phenomenal. For me, though, I still think we need British Speedway on a broadcasting network, whether it be TNT, Sky Sports, Eurosport, whatever it may be, for the simple reason I looked into this. So MLS was one of the only sports that you'll kind of find that is subscription only, right? So in the time that the MLS has moved to Apple TV, where you've got to subscribe to actually watch it, the actual viewership of people watching the MLS on TV has went down 70%. So when you think about a niche sport like Speedway, you've got a British Speedway Network, you're obviously aiming it at people, which quite rightly so, because obviously we've discussed this before as well, and given what your wife's involved in terms of marketing, what the sport needs to be aiming at is people that have a genuine interest in it, a base level interest in the sport, and then they get into it that way. But I just feel as if it's got to be on some sort of broadcaster to supplement that as well, that the odd person can trip up on Speedway effectively.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I don't know even how much an impact it has in regards to maybe fans through the door, but how do you go, and we all know the work that Phil Morris has tried to do the last couple of years, or Team GB, and how do you go to a major national company and ask for sponsorship without that level of exposure?
Mm-hmm.
You know, as we say, streaming and club streaming and the BSN have done a great job, and they've saved clubs. You know,
Yeah.
the money that comes to the BSN and the money that comes for clubs' internal streams keeps the door open at some clubs. That can't be denied, and that's great. And you're right, if that encourages lapsed fans or fair weather fans to get back into the sport or go to the sport more, then that's a success. But on a bigger level, you know, and it's never been harder because of the options, all the streaming services and the amount of channels you've got. You know, gone are the days of, you know, I use the Champions League as an example, and I'm not comparing Speed with the Champions League, but I watched when the Champions League was on ITV. I watched every Wednesday night.
Mm-hmm.
Man United versus Galatasaray, Arsenal versus whoever. You watched it because that was all you got. But it was exposure. You know, now that there's 100 different channels, do I look out Galatasaray versus Porto? I don't. But you still need to be there for the people that do, and you still need to be there for the people that are just sitting on a Monday night, flicking through the channels and finding something. Now, what the answer is, I don't know, because we know the production costs are so high. You know, does there need to be money found into the BSPL? Do it themselves, whether that's, you know, through guys like Martin and Ben and stuff, and then they sell a pre-produced product. So all a Premier Sports needs to do, all a Quest, all an ITV4, you know, pick a channel needs to do is literally take the satellite feed and hit play.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not spending 80 grand on
Like
outside
Premier Sports do
broadcasting.
with Swedish Speedway, that's all they do.
Exactly. But I completely agree. I don't think from an exposure point of view and from a marketing and sponsorship point of view, we can go into a season with just in-house streaming or just club streaming, because that just narrows that pool down a little bit more. And it's, you know, there's only so many times you can go to the same well. So they need something, and I know they're working hard on it. I won't go into figureheads they're putting on companies and stuff like that to try and get involved, but if they do open doors, great. But it's the one bit of news we're all kind of hoping for over the winter, isn't it? Is some kind of deal struck, and the armchair fan can see Speedway somewhere without it being a stream.
If you've not heard all of tonight's show and you want to catch back up, the full show will be available on YouTube if you would like to watch the whole show again, or it will be available via Spotify, Apple and Amazon Music as well. And don't forget to keep up to date with all things Talk Speedway on Facebook, Instagram and X, although I think I've been locked out of that, but that's a different matter altogether. But you can catch us there. Again, thank you to our sponsors at STS, ESS and LVT, and of course our associated partner and the Speedway Riders Benevolent nearly got there. Bastard. Benevolent Fund. Anyway, thank you to everybody for sending in your messages and joining in the conversation as we've been going on tonight. A lot of messages have came through, and of course a lot of people watching as well. It's very much appreciated. Thank you for joining us throughout the season as well. Until next time, goodbye.